Today, we're going to dive into one of the biggest economic myths floating around Washington right now. It's the idea that inflation can somehow fix our national debt. It's the financial version of playing with fire. All right, so buckle up because after this short intro, the Wealthologist breaks down what's really at stake when the government lets inflation run wild. All right, so here's the deal. For years, inflation sat quietly in the background, kind of like that old treadmill that I've got that I swore I'd use and now sits in storage. From 2010 to 2020, prices rose at just 1.7% a year on average. Now, as you remember, COVID hit after that. Stimulus checks flew, and suddenly inflation decided to hit the gym and bulk up quite a bit. Now, at its peak in 2022, it hit 9%. Where are we now? We're somewhere between about 2.5 and 3%, which is still above the Fed's sweet spot of 2%. But here's the wild part. Some economists and politicians, they're starting to whisper a crazy idea, saying, hey, maybe inflation, it's not so bad. Maybe it can help us shrink the national debt. Are you saying the same thing I am? What in the world? Well, here's the thinking. If we inflate the dollar, we can pay off our $38 trillion debt with cheaper dollars, kind of like paying back a loan in monopoly money. But I want to tell you something. They're forgetting about the real cost of inflation. And spoiler alert, it doesn't come cheap. Inflation, as you know, it makes everything more expensive. Your groceries, your rent, your vacation. It hurts retirees on fixed incomes. It raises the cost of borrowing, and it eats away at growth little by little by little. Now, even worse, much of our national debt is tied to programs like Social Security and Medicare, which are inflation indexed. So, the more prices rise, the more we owe in benefits. In fact, the total unfunded liabilities in those programs, it's estimated at about $76 trillion. So, trying to inflate away the debt, it's kind of like trying to fix a leaky boat, but you're dumping more water into the boat. All right, so what's the better plan, right? Well, we got to keep the Fed focused on price stability. We got to push Congress and the president to do the hard work, which means you got to cut waste, you got to fix the budget, and you got to tackle some of the entitlements head on. Here's the thing. It worked in the 80s. Paul Volcker, he slammed the brakes on inflation and set the stage for a massive boom. We really need that kind of courage right now. All right, my action step for you. If you are worried about inflation and how it affects your retirement or your investments, make sure your financial plan is built for a high rate environment. This is not the time to assume things will just go back to normal. Also, I'm wondering, and tell me in the comments below, do you think that inflation is being used as a short term fix for long term problems? Or is it just getting out of control? Hopefully you liked what you heard today. Hit that button, that like button below. Drop a comment and make sure you subscribe. It always helps to have more folks learning more about the human side of money and what's working and what's not working in this crazy economy. Until next time, I'm Chris Hobart, the Wealthologist.